What's happening, fishing friends? Welcome to another episode. Fall is officially here, so you know what that means. We're talking about my top 5 favorite fall bass fishing lures. Now, I'll put a special emphasis on lures that I use when I'm fishing from the bank because bank anglers just don't get enough love. But no worries, if you fish from a boat or kayak, these lures will catch you fish all the same. So today I will take you through the lure types, the colors, and the combos that I fish them on. I'm going to let you know why I chose these options and give you a little tip for fishing each one. So enough talking, let's get into it. Lure number 1 is the paddle tail swim bait. You know, when I'm fishing from the bank, I'm always trying to think of ways to be versatile and have multiple options when I'm out there walking around. The paddle tail swim bait does that. It's not just the lure, it's actually the hook that you choose that makes this option so versatile. Bring a few different hook types with you and you can change from skipping under docks to going straight through grass and wood to getting a little extra flash. So for the actual swim bait itself, I try to match the hatch when I'm throwing swim baits. So if you're in, a larger lake, you can throw a larger swim bait. They come all the way up, 6-7 inches. Here I happen to have a 4.5-inch kickback shad from Grande Bass. You can throw a skinny dipper. They make large Kitex in all kinds of size, but I'll go with a larger swim bait if it's, a bigger body of water where I think there's bigger fish. Now, as I go to, really big ponds or smaller lakes, you can drop down in size. They happen to have the Kitex there. That's a 3.8-inch. They come in a 3.3-inch. Strike King has the Rage Swimmer, 3.75-inch. Or you could drop down to one of my other favorites, the Reaction Innovations Little Dipper, just a smaller version of that skinny dipper. Let's say the bait's really small, you notice the bass spits up something, one of those real little tiny fish. They've even got the little 2.75-inch or 2.8-inch Kitex or Rage Swimmers, the real small swim baits, so I try to match the hatch. As far as colors, again, same thing. I'm going to throw usually a bluegillish type pattern in the ponds and small lakes around here. This is that kickback shad and more of like a baby bluegill, kind of a silverish blue. Shad lakes, I'll try to throw some sort of shad pattern. That's kind of a see-through with a white belly. That one they actually just call gizzard shad. Or this one a little bit different. That one's called rainbow shad. And these see-through type are great when the water's cleaner. And then of course a white. White's just a great all-around. You can mimic crappie, shad, especially when that water's dirty, white does really well. Okay, now the actual heads, the part that makes the swim bait so versatile, you can start out with an open hook. So something like this, you can see how you thread that soft plastic on there and the hook's exposed. So that hook is always going to be up, pointing out in the open. Now that can be good because your hookup ratio is better on these, but can also be bad because you snag these a lot easier, especially when you're fishing from the bank. This happens to be a 6-cents Divine head that I showed you, and these, the soft plastic screws on, so these are great if you're trying to skip it under docks or skip it around stuff. That plastic doesn't pull off as easy. Here are some regular Cumberland jig heads. You can see there, those you just thread on, no type of special keeper, just an open hook, real plain Jane. They come in all types. Now from there you can go to a belly-weighted swim bait hook. So for these, you screw the nose of the soft plastic into there, and then you can actually rig this weedless, which is great for fishing from the bank because you can get close to wood, grass, around anything. These things don't get hung up easy at all, so you can get close and in that thick cover. And then from there you go to the third type, which is the underspin. So when you want a little flash, a little extra bling, that water's dirty, you want to throw off, it's almost like a finesse spinner bait. Throwing off the flash from that, an underspin, that's a Cumberland, that's an open hook design. Or you can go over to like the Owner Flashy Swimmer. So again, that belly-weighted swim bait hook, but it's got the spinning flash on the bottom of it. That's what it looks like rigged up. Now the combo that you fish it on is going to depend on the type of hook you're using. You're not going to use the same combo for a little size 1/0 versus the 6/0. It's a much heavier, stouter hook. You've got to have a heavier rod to set that. So my kind of all-around is just a 7-foot medium heavy. This happens to be rated up to lures 7/8 of an ounce. Medium heavy fast rod like that will do about anything. Most of those really will, except for the real small stuff or the big gargantuans. I like a 6 or 7 speed reel. This happens to be the SLX DC, but you can use whatever you like, just depending on how fast you want to move that. And then 15 or 17 pound fluorocarbon is usually my choice. And that brings me to a good tip for fishing these. Vary your retrieve speed and depth. A lot of newer folks just get in the habit of throwing it out and reeling it in. But pay attention to where you're getting bit. Was it a foot under the surface? Was it in the middle of the column where you can no longer see that bait? Or were you dragging the bottom, especially when that water gets colder? Oftentimes you have to slow roll it and tick that bottom, keeping that bait in contact. So don't just throw out and reel it in. Try to figure out where you're at in the water column and try to reproduce that speed to get more bites. Okay, lure number 2, sticking with the moving baits. During the fall, I always have a spinner bait with me. Easily a top 3 confidence lure of all time for me. Growing up, this was all I wanted to throw, chuck and wind to spinnerbait. And that's how you get good with the lure, how you get confidence in it, fishing it in different situations, different spots. You start to learn and figure out where does it work well, where does it not work well. You gain confidence in it. They're a versatile lure and pretty darn weedless, great around standing timber, lay down logs, that type of stuff. Not great in the real thick brush or grass, but you can bring it over grass. Especially in the fall, a lot of that grass is dying off. So if you can hit those few spots that still have good vegetation and take it on the outsides of that, a lot of time you're gonna find a few fish there. There are tons of different types and brands out there. War Eagle makes some great stuff. You can see here, this is a finesse version, so a smaller spinnerbait, great for those smaller lakes, ponds, a little bit smaller, more compact profile. You can move up in size, something like these. These Strike Kings are great, kind of a mid-size, great for, bigger ponds, lakes, where you'd think the bait's gonna be a little bit larger. Great for something in the mid-size. And then they also put out kind of that medium vibration. That's the other thing with the spinnerbait is there's a lot of stuff going on, especially that flash and vibration. The bigger blade you've got, the more water it's gonna displace. So the dirtier, muddier the water, I'm gonna wanna go to a bigger blade with more vibration. The cleaner, I'm gonna go to a smaller, more subtle spinnerbait. And I also match my conditions for a spinnerbait. I'm not gonna throw this when it's gin clear water, slick calm. There's a lot going on. You've got the skirt moving. If you had a paddle tail trailer, you got that flopping. You've got flash from blades, vibration from those. So generally I'm throwing these in stained to dirty water, especially when I've got either a ripple on the water, wind, or overcast. Something to break up that profile because you're gonna be trying to keep these above the fish, right? So when they're looking up at that, any sort of cloud cover or ripple on the water is gonna break up that and they're just gonna see that flash. That's the time you wanna throw a spinnerbait. And my personal all-time favorite color is a white and chartreuse spinnerbait. I don't know why, but in dirty water, that's just my go-to. A lot of people will go to a white or a version of white. This kind of has like some silver in it. And that's a white with painted blades, great in muddy water. Those painted blades show up well. Again, another sort of shad mimicking color, and then especially post-spawn, or if you just notice the fish are feeding on bluegills, I go to a bluegill spinnerbait. Those are also great in ponds. Now the combo, again, this is the exact same one I just showed you before. Oh, and a Nichols spinnerbait. That's a white and chartreuse. Nichols makes some great stuff. I've got one of theirs up here too. They make awesome spinnerbaits, all sorts of sizes and blades, but the exact same combo, 7 foot, medium heavy. You can go shorter if you're around, a lot of wood and such. You can be more accurate. So if you move down to like a 6'10", something like that, I know a lot of guys will go to when they're in and around a lot of trees when they're not getting distance, but they want accuracy. Now for the speed of the reel, you want something with good torque, so you don't want to go to a high-speed reel on a spinnerbait. It's got a lot of resistance and drag. When you're reeling in a spinnerbait, sometimes it can be, almost like it feels like a lot of work if you've got a faster reel. So a 6-speed reel, this happens to be a 7.2 speed, would work fine as well, but usually I'll go with a 6-speed reel on a spinnerbait because the lower in speed you go, the more torque you have, the more power it is. So it's not as much work when you've got a slower reel. And then line, depending on where I'm at, 15 up to 20 if you're around a ton of wood. I love to throw the spinnerbait around standing timber, so no problem jumping up to 20 pound there. But if it's just kind of light grass, small wood, 15 or 17 pound will work fine. Now a tip for the spinnerbait is get it as close to cover and bump into things. As bank anglers, I know a lot of people like to fish safe. They don't want to get real close to that tree because they're going to get snagged, or they don't want to get too close to those rocks and get stuck. But to get those reaction bites, you have to do that. Get close to that tree, bump over that log, or hit that rock and come over it, because when they do that, those fish will react. They'll just see something come up real quick and grab it. They're not even thinking. They're not even hungry. It's just like if I were to throw a ball at you and you caught up and grabbed it, that's what those fish do. When they see something, they're eating it. Another tip is change your cadence. That spinnerbait has a lot of drawing power, so if you're just consistently, again, just casting and winding within 6 inches at the top, let it get down a little more. Sometimes they might like it a little bit deeper where they can see that flash if it's dirtier water. Vary your retrieve and bump into stuff. All right, lure number 3, still covering water with a search bait. It's fun. It's the lipless crankbait. Lipless crankbait. Throwing this thing up shallow in the fall when those fish are up feeding, chasing shad, chasing bait fish, it is a ton of fun. Burning this, banging it into stuff. The lipless has a real tight wobble on it, so it's not like a square bill with a wide hunting action. It's a real tight wobble, and that's key, especially as that water gets colder. Again, as fall progresses, that vegetation is going to die off, so the places where you couldn't necessarily fish this in the summer, those spots are going to open up, and if you can find any of those isolated grass, vegetation patches, you can bring this over it, pop it over it, good chance you're going to find a bass. So the brands and types, well, you've got a 1/2 ounce, and this happens to be a cotton cordell. In my opinion, the best cheap budget lipless out there. It works, it sounds good. The only thing I'm going to tell you is change the hooks on them. They've got kind of those cheap brass looking hook deals on them. I personally don't like them at all. I always change them out, but the lipless itself, it's got a higher pitched tinny sound, like BB's in there. Sounds great, works great, burn it up shallow. You don't have to worry if you get it stuck. You know, they're a couple bucks. Those were $3 something. I actually got them on sale, I think for 80% off when Gander went out, something like that. But you can find them at Walmart for like $1.99 a lot of times too. So great, cheap budget option, the Cotton Cordell Spot. Another one that I've been using the past year, 2 years, is the Berkley War Pig. So again, it comes in that larger 1/2 ounce when you're trying to mimic larger prey, or a smaller 1/4 ounce. I like their colors. A little bit different sound, not as high pitched tinny, more of a harder plastic sound, I guess. They work good, they've all run true, they've got good Berkley Fusion hooks on them, so you don't have to change the hooks out on these. So if you don't like to do that, spend a couple dollars more, check out those Berkley War Pigs. A staple among a lot of folks, the Strike King Red Eye Shad, again in the 1/2 ounce or smaller 1/4 ounce, depending on the size of bait you're around. And of course, you can't talk about lipless crankbaits without talking about the original rattle trap. There's a reason a lot of people call all lipless crankbaits rattle traps, because of those. The Bill Lewis rattle trap really put those on the map, got them extremely popular with anglers, and those now come with Mustad triple grips, so don't have to worry about changing the hooks on those either. Okay, for colors, when it's sunny out, I like to go with something that's got some flash. Either a chrome in cleaner water, or a gold does better in dirty water when you want some flash. Small lakes and ponds, again, a bluegill color or a sunfish color of some sort is awesome. As in the spring, you can go back to that cold water, and red does well. It does amazing in the spring. I wasn't a believer for a long time, but throwing red in the spring gets bit. And in the fall, it'll start to bite that color again too. And then finally, some sort of shad pattern. It could be a white with black pack. This happens to be a chartreuse sexy shad, or just a regular sexy shad. All those do really well, especially in that dirty water. You've got those bright colors to stand out. Now for the combo that you throw it on, you're gonna wanna match the size. Of course, a 1/2 ounce, you're gonna want a little bit heavier rod as opposed to a little smaller 1/4 ounce. The hooks on these are also gonna be smaller too, so you wanna keep that in mind. But a medium power for those smaller lipless crankbaits, or moving up to a medium heavy for the larger ones, it's got a softer tip on it. So you don't want a real stiff, you know, broomstick of a rod. You want something with a little bend in it to keep those treble hooks pinned. You know, you think with 2 big old treble hooks like that, you could never lose a fish, but you gotta remember the hooks, each little barb on those is small. So you want something with a little bit of tip to it, but still a decent backbone to keep that fish pinned. Length is gonna be up to you, shorter for more accuracy, longer. 7.2 is like my all-around favorite. You can still cast it far, but I'm still accurate with it, so kind of match the length to what you like. A 6 or 7 speed reel really just depends on how fast you're wanting to move it. I don't go up into the real high speed stuff. If I'm doing more of a slow, steady, you can go down to the 6 speed, even a 5 speed if you wanted, but when I'm yo-yoing that lipless, I'll go to like a 7 speed because I'm moving it with the rod, taking up slack. Moving it with the rod, taking up slack, so I like a little bit faster reel. And then line is kind of like my crankbaits. With these smaller ones, I'll go with like 12-pound fluorocarbon. When I'm moving up to like a 1/2 ounce, especially if I'm around a little bit of grass and stuff, 15, even up to 17-pound does well. Now my quick tip for the lipless, again, is talking about retrieve. Don't get caught in that zombie mode of just casting it out and reeling it in. With the lipless, you're gonna put twitches in it, make that kind of bait kind of flutter. Especially when I'm around rocks and stuff, I'm gonna bang it into it, pop it over stuff. If that's not working when I'm fishing shallow, let's say I get to a drop off, you know, where there's a hump and it gets a little bit deeper. If I'm casting out into deeper water, bringing it in shallow, I often like to go with a yo-yo retrieve. Especially when that water gets colder, the yo-yo can be the difference maker. I'm telling you, I've been out casting, retrieving, not caught anything, and switch over to that yo-yo retrieve, which means I'm casting it out, I'm pulling the tip of my rod up, and reeling up the slack, and that's taking that lure and fluttering up, and then it comes down like lifeless. So it's almost like a jerk bait. And you get then you pause it. Same thing with the lipless. You pull it up, it rattles real hard, and then it just kind of flutters down like it's dying. It's mimicking a dying bait fish, and that's usually when they hit it. You rip it up hard, and then it falls down, and they'll hit it. So vary up that retrieve, vary up your depth. Don't just get caught in the zombie cast and retrieve mode. Okay, moving on to lure number 4. Some of the most fun you will have in the fall is with the Topwater walking bait. Searching for those active fish. They're moving up in the shallows. You'll see them blowing up on stuff. If you see that and you start throwing a walking bait around, get ready. You know, earlier this year I got to fish a little bit deeper rock quarry where fish were suspended out deeper and feeding up topwater. And this was, you know, clear in the summer, but it's mimicking the same thing in the fall when those fish are really pushing and they're grouped up on the bigger lakes chasing shad, you know, back in the shallows, or smaller lakes around here, pushing up and chasing those bait, and you're gonna see bait jumping and skipping. Throwing this is fun. And this style of topwater bait is great because you can walk it around and cover a bunch of water. Great for those people that kind of have fishing ADD where you don't want to throw out a Cinco or a Ned rig and just slowly hop it and wait. This is action. Now, as far as the styles, you really can't talk about a topwater walking bait without talking about the Head and Zara Spook. This is the topwater bait that I learned on way back in the day when I was younger. They still make them. This is a new one that I picked up, and I did my own kind of custom feathered treble on there. Great bait, they're easy, they're relatively cheap, and they still work. Another one of my all-time favorites is the KVD Sexy Dog. This is in a sexy chrome color. You can see that's definitely had wear and tear on it over the use. They also make these in a one knocker, so listen to the difference. Different topwater lures are gonna have different sounds, so play with that. You know, if you notice somebody else is getting more bites, they might have something with that sound versus your kind of higher pitched tinny. Mess with that and see if it makes a difference. Lucky Craft has the Sammy. I couldn't find it. I've got a couple. I don't know where I put them, but the Lucky Craft Sammy is great. And then I've been trying out some of the Berkeley stuff. This happens to be the Jaywalker. There's also the Hijacker, a number of these different type, but again, just a straight, slender walking bait. What that means is as you work this lure on slack line, it cuts back and forth, almost in like a zigzag motion. And that mimics a bait fish running away and drives those fish nuts. Colors, I honestly keep it real simple. For those real clear lakes, I'll go something translucent, almost a clearish white. When it's low light and I notice they're feeding on shad or bait fish, I'll go with just a straight white or bone color. It's great when it's low light because it makes just a good outline up there. And then those days where it's sunny and you notice you want a little bit of flash, this used to be kind of all chrome, but now the bottom's kind of a white chrome mix, but something like a chromish color that puts off some flash or just a straight chrome is great for those sunny times. Okay, now as for the combo, for the larger baits like this, you know, 4.5 inch, almost a 5 inch walking bait, again, I'm gonna go to that soft tipped medium heavy. I don't want it to be real flimsy like a true crankbait rod because you're working that bait with the tip of your rod, so you're popping it in slack line. If it's real flimsy, it's gonna be bouncing all over, so you want something that's decently stout but still has a soft tip because remember, you've got those treble hooks, you want to keep that fish pinned. Now to some of the smaller spooks, and they've even got the Zara Spook puppies, which are smaller than these. I'll move over to like a medium or medium light crankbait rod. So again, a decent backbone, but still kind of a moderate, fast, soft tip for those treble hooks. Now usually with topwater, I like just a little bit longer rod. 7.2 again is kind of my favorite. Oftentimes I'm really covering water. So if you're casting over a long point, you know, a big flat, whatever, you want to get a long cast out there. Now, if you're working close range around, you know, wood or grass or such, you could drop down to a smaller rod. But I like a 7-speed reel. That's my all-around favorite. Again, I'm moving the bait with the rod, not the reel. So I'm just using the reel to bring up slack line. And then my all-around favorite is 14-pound mono. Even on the larger or smaller, 14-pound mono is kind of my go-to for the topwater walking baits. Now I do like mono over braid because when that is walking back and forth, if you have a real limp braid, there's a good chance it's going to keep getting caught up in that front hook. So I like that mono. It floats and it's a little bit stiffer. It doesn't tend to get wrapped up and under the bait as easy. Now a tip for these walk the dog baits, again, I've almost said it on every one, is vary your retrieve speed and don't be afraid to pause. So I see a lot of newer folks walking these, or you know, when I'm out fishing and see people working them, they're working it real fast. Pop, 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 and that thing's just darting around. Oftentimes fish don't want that. You know, they want to key in on something that's a little bit different. So I find starting out with just like a moderate pop, 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 that retrieve usually works the best for me. Now, if a fish blows up on it, I usually will pause it. And then I'll start out kind of quick. And a lot of times that fish will come up and explode on it. And even if I'm just working it regularly, in between that work, you know, pop, 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 I'll just pause it. Pop, pop. And I'm not talking about 2, 3, 4 seconds. I'm just saying pop, pop, pause, pop, pop, that split second. And a lot of times that's when that fish will just, so vary your retrieve and don't be afraid to pause. Okay, lure number 5, a bottom bait. You know, as that water gets colder, a lot of those fish are going to start to congregate around rocks, anything that starts to hold heat, but especially fishing jetties when you're fishing, when the water gets colder from the bank, they can be a great spot to find fish. And over the past few years, I have really become a fan of the finesse jig. Of course, Rand Izzle turned me onto this. I was big at throwing swim jigs and just kind of regular jigs around brush, but I was never huge at working like a little finesse jig around riprap and such. So it was really hard for me not to say the finesse jig, but my lure number 5, probably not a big surprise in the fall, is a Ned rig. It's an easy lure for beginners to use. You're just popping it. Some people just reel it back. I'm telling you, there's not a wrong way to work it. Short pops, larger pops. It's a very uninvasive looking creature and fish eat it. Now I know when people hear Ned rig, they think, you know, just the typical Z-Man mushroom head with the regular little finesse, just regular Z-Man TRD. But the Ned rig has really blown up the past few years. You've got places like Zoom making little Ned rig soft plastics. Z-Man themselves have really branched out. They've got these little TRD craws. They've got these TRD hogs. Even the little TRD bugs, which look like little beaver baits. All kinds of different options to put on a little Ned rig hook, and it really just consists of this little Ned rig mushroom shaped head and a small soft plastic. Now some folks will argue that there's no reason not to use the regular Elastec because of the durability. It's something that floats and stand up. Some people completely believe by that and say you have to throw these, but I've experimented with a bunch of different stuff, craw type, little creature type, and they all get bit. It's just such a great way to catch fish. You know, some people say it only catches dinks, but I've caught big fish on them, small fish, you catch numbers. It's just fun to throw. Now speaking of the hooks, as I said, they come in all different types. You've got some with like the wire weed guard. These are called the Ned locks. They got like a little keeper lead head deal thing inside there. But the thing that's really helped me out fishing from the bank is all these different types of companies. Flatland Tackle is the one that I've used the most, that make these EWG style Ned rig heads. They are lifesavers, either in 1/16 or 1/8. Those are my two favorites. Fishing from the bank, this makes life so much easier. It's complete, let me rig one up. This little guy will completely change the way you think of fishing a Ned rig around cover, because look at that, 100% weedless. You just expose that hook like you would with a Texas rig, and look at that. Streamlined little lure there. It's got the EWG hook, great hookup ratio. Change the Ned rig for me. This is pretty much exclusively what I use when I'm fishing from the bank, because it doesn't have, you know, a little open hook like that that can get snagged so darn easy. Now for colors of the soft plastics and types, I just kind of mess around with it. You cannot go wrong with, like I said before, the regular TRD. They float, they look great, they're extremely durable. You can catch a ton of fish on one of these, but don't be afraid to try some of the creature stuff. I keep the colors natural, cleaner the water is, just like I would a Texas rig. So a green pumpkin or kind of a light brownish color is great in natural, clear water, natural colors. As that water gets dirtier and more stained, I'll go to my darker colors, so like a black and blue, June bug, or straight black, something that makes a good silhouette for those fish to see. As for the combo that I fish it on, I always fish mine on a spinning rig. Oh, and there you can see that's one of those little TRD craws rigged up. That's one of those Flatland Tackle heads, a little bit smaller hook. Goes great on those little those TRD craws. But I always throw my Ned rig on a spinning rig. I personally just like a 7-foot-ish medium power rod. Spinning rods in general are going to be softer than casting rods, so soft spinning rod does great with those tiny wire finesse hooks. Remember, it's not a super fat hook, so you don't want a real stiff, heavy rod. There's a good chance you're going to break that hook. And I have, you know, especially when you get it hung up or something, you can break it with just a little medium power spinning rod. The reel, I like a 3,000 size reel. That's my favorite. You can use whatever you like, but I like a little bit bigger bail. Again, I'm working the Ned rig with my rod. So the reel is just bringing up slack. So if you go to like a little small 1,000 size, that's actually a slower reel because the spool is smaller. So going up to a 3,000 size, they might all be the same gear ratio, but the larger spool I'm going to bring in line quicker. So I like a 3,000 size. I always run 10 to 15 pound braid to a fluorocarbon leader, either 8 to 10 pound, depending on what I'm around. But usually my general all-purpose setup is 15 pound braid to 10 pound fluorocarbon. I know I'm really safe with that. You know, those guys up north that are around real clear water might be dropping down to 8 pound braid with 6 pound fluorocarbon, you know, around real skittish, scarce smallies. And if you are fishing around a little bit more wood, you might bump up to 15 pound braid with 12 pound fluorocarbon. Just play with the structure that you're around. Okay, now my tip for the Ned rig is go as light as you can get away with, especially when you're around a lot of rocks. So when you're around riprap, if you just grab a 1/4 ounce Ned rig head and throw it out there, good chance you're going to get that head stuck. If you can bump up to a 1/8 or even a 1/16 and still keep bottom contact, the lighter you go around real chunky rock, the less you're going to get hung up. So the same goes for like shaky heads, jigs. You've got to remember you have to keep bottom contact. So if you go light enough that you can't feel the bottom anymore, you can't tell when you're on bottom or not, you need to go a little bit heavier. But As long as you can feel each one of those rocks as you're bringing it over it, and you feel it tick and stuff, as light as you can go away with, that's a big help, because if you just always go with the same size wherever you're at, it might not be the best for that spot. So as light as you can get away with, you'll get snagged less. All right, fishing friends, there you have it. Those are my top 5 favorite fall bass fishing lures: the swim bait, the spinnerbait, the lipless, a topwater walking bait, and the Ned rig. You take all 5 of those with you, and I guarantee you'll be able to find some fish where you're at. Some days the grind might be tougher than others, but embrace it and keep searching. You can't catch them unless you're out there. Now do me a favor and comment below. Let me know what your favorite fall fishing lures are. Are they the same as mine? Do you differ? Is there one that wasn't on my list that you think has to be on there? Comment below and let me know. I love hearing from all of you. Now tonight's subscribed fishing friend is Joey Machuski. Joey, thank you so much for watching and always commenting. I appreciate you supporting my channel, and everybody else, thank you all. Everybody that watches and continues to support, I appreciate you all. My channel, again, has done better than I thought it ever could, and that's because every single one of you. So thank you all so very much for watching. I got to get this cleaned up and edit, so thanks, and we'll see you next time.